Welcome to DRT, Direct Real Talk with the Arizona Department of Real Estate. I'm Assistant Commissioner for the Enforcement and Compliance Division, Liz Recchia. This podcast is designed to bring you information and insight into the world of the Arizona Department of Real Estate. The department is obligated to comply with the law and with Arizona Administrative Code. But how the department makes decisions and the considerations brought to that decision-making is interesting and necessary to understand, since the mission of the department is to protect the public interest through licensure and regulation of the real estate profession in Arizona. On October 29, 2024, the Arizona Department of Real Estate hosted an event for the public, investors, and real estate licensees. AZREIA, the Arizona Real Estate Investors Association, graciously volunteered to host the event in their training room. Our goal was to edify the public, licensees, and investors on several tools of real estate, their proper use, considerations to be made by both parties, legal and tax consequences to be addressed. We spoke of encouraging all parties to a transaction to ask questions, create a resource team they can gain guidance from, and only sign contracts when they understand all the terms of the contract. Join me as we listen in on the live event recorded on October 29th.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I know that.
All right, good afternoon, and thank you for coming. My name is Liz Recchia. I'm Assistant Commissioner at the Arizona Department of Real Estate.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to, first of all, thank AZREIA and Mike Del Prete for being the hosts of this event. The Department of Real Estate was so grateful that AZREIA was willing to help us out by providing us this room. So please thank Mike and AZREIA. And I'd like to introduce to you our Commissioner of Real Estate, Susan Nicholson.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for being here. One of the things that I know at the Department of Real Estate is I'm really good at taking the very top talent from the industry and stealing it to the Department of Real Estate. And Liz Recchia is a mastermind in and of herself of tools that investors can utilize because she's been an investor herself for, well, we're not going to say time periods because that's just not time, but a long time. And so, a long time.
A long time.
Far longer than it looks, by the way she looks. One thing that we do see at the Department of Real Estate is people getting in trouble because they're trying to utilize old tools that have always been there in real estate investing and that are legal and something that you can use, but they're using them improperly. So they're employing maybe 2/3 of it, they forget the last third of it, which is critically important in law, and then they make up another new portion of it, which is just really bad, usually. So we like the creativity, but we need people to not harm the public in real estate transactions. And so I'm a huge person who believes in educate instead of regulate wherever possible. I truly, my rose-colored glasses are not completely smashed. I believe that if we get the information out there and people know how to do better, they will do better because the vast majority of people just want to earn a healthy living and do the right thing for people. So this is our first partnership with investors in educating in a workshop. All of you guys have feedback forms whenever you are changing process or trying to improve things. You always kind of have that one step forward, two step backwards. Hopefully you get to 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards at some point in time. But we rely on your feedback. We need to know if this was worth your time coming down here, if we nailed it as far as value of what you're looking for, if you want more, if you want something different. And we look forward to partnering with you to where when you think of the Department of Real Estate, you smile instead of think, oh my gosh, what have I done? Which, I don't think anybody cries when Mandy calls anymore, but that did happen initially.
Ron still cries.
Ron still cries. Anyway, thank you so much. It is wonderful to see a full room. I love that there's so many many people out here that want information, want to learn, and have taken time out of your busy days to be here. So thank you so much, and I hope it is wonderful for you. I always learn when I listen to Liz. So.
And before we give it back to Liz, I want to share 3 people with you in this room. Vivian, Lauren, and Gabe, would you please stand up? These are 3 of our most amazing compliance specialists at the Department of Real Estate. They're in charge of enforcement and compliance under Liz Recchia and myself. They deal with HOA issues. So thank you. They deal with a lot of trust account issues. Basically, anybody who's been found in an investigation guilty of some kind of act, that they're following up continually and making sure that the public remains protected and the new consent order is taken care of. And they continually learn and try new things, and they love the licensees that we support. So if we could give a round of applause for David. Just in case you don't know me, my name is Mandy. I'm the Deputy Commissioner. People still do cry. I'm still very confused by that. But they should cry more because I have Liz now that I get to work with as my partner. And she's really, really smart. So I hope you learned a lot today. If there's anything we can do, we are very touchable. We're very reachable. The commissioner is just a human being like everybody else. And we want to help everybody with great success. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mandy. So I want to let everyone know within this room we have people who are real estate licensees. We have people who are members of the public who saw the advertising and thought this might be interesting to know about. And we absolutely have investors as well. So this workshop came about because, as Commissioner said, we have been getting complaints from the public as well as from licensees about tools used in real estate, but they don't understand. Some homeowners will actually sign away some of their rights and not realize it. They don't understand the contract that they are signing. And we have some licensees who are not really familiar with some of the tools, and sometimes they think that a tool an investor is using to make an offer on a property is illegal. It's not illegal. The only question is, does it meet the needs of the client? So terms of the transaction become very important. So as a licensee, if you don't understand or don't recognize some of the words, you might jump to a conclusion that someone's doing something that's not appropriate, when in fact you just need to ask a few more questions and you and your client need to understand better what those terms are. So that's how this workshop came to be. If it goes well today and you find it interesting, please let us know on your survey, because we would absolutely like to produce more of these informative type of workshops for people of the public, licensees, and anyone who is basically interested in what's going on in real estate. So imagine that you have a young couple and they would like to buy a house, but the world around them is falling apart. Banks are going out of business. People who had jobs last year don't have them now. Interest rates are over 10%. And everyone knows a young person just can't buy a house. But they decide to take matters into their own hands. And so they eventually do become homeowners. And they do that by buying a small little house in a neighborhood that's really far out of town and not so great. And they fix it up and they sell it. And then they do that again. And each time that they buy that little house that's a fixer, they're moving closer to home. And eventually, after 10 years, they're able to buy that little house in the neighborhood they want to live and raise their family in. Now imagine another couple. They too live in a world that is falling apart. Interest rates are over 18%. Banks are having financial troubles. And because there's been no growth policies, there's not a lot of houses, and the houses you have are very expensive. And everybody knows a young person just can't buy a house. But they decide to take things into their own hands as well. And they buy a house in a really not so great neighborhood. There's not even children in this neighborhood. It's such a bad little neighborhood. But they fix up a little bungalow, and in the backyard, or what used to be the backyard, they eventually are able to build 2 rental units. And the tenant's rent helps pay their mortgage. Now, over the next 6 years, they go out farther from town and they find fixer houses, fix them up, and then sell them to people who couldn't fix them up themselves but really wanted to live in that house, in that neighborhood. And eventually, they're able to buy their own little fixer in the neighborhood they want to raise their family in. Now, imagine a third couple, and they too want to buy a house, and the world that they're living in is falling apart. You're in a multi-year recession.
And interest rates are between 7.5% and 8.5%, but there's very little inventory, and what you find is too expensive for the average consumer to buy. But they take things into their own hands, and they eventually become homeowners by speaking with their rental property owner and devising a way to purchase their house separate from the land and rent the land under themselves for about 5 or 6 years until they can finally purchase the land. So they become full-fledged fee simple homeowners in less than 10 years. Now, what do all these people have in common? Well, they decided to think differently about what everybody else said. And they used different tools that are used in real estate. The first couple was in 1907. And that was the crisis that was one of the worst financial crises this country's ever seen. It led to the development of the Federal Reserve that we know of today. And they used sweat equity and owner carrybacks. The second couple was in 1982. That wasn't a terrific time. And as I said, interest rates, 18% is where you started. For those of you who don't know, you paid 4 to 6 points above that if you had great credit. And they used the tools of sweat equity and equity sharing. And the third couple was in 2001. And they used the tool of working with their rental property owner, who it turned out didn't want to deal with tenants or toilets anymore, but was really great at cashing those checks every month from the land lease and then eventually selling them, because that property owner really wanted her renter to own it all. And they wanted to. They just needed a little bit of a runway to be able to afford both the house and the land. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is the different tools that people use either in single or in conjunction with other tools to help them buy and sell real estate. I would like to welcome our panel. These are investors. They make their living with investing. So we're going to introduce Mike and Nate and Ron. Please come on up. It started here.
I think I'm right here.
Great. So we're going to start out by asking each of them to tell us just a bit about themselves and how they got into investing and the tools of investing that they tend to use most. So we're going to start with you, Nate.
Okay. Well, I got into real estate right out of college. I didn't know what that was going to mean. I just knew I liked real estate and I liked being a real estate investor. So I've had my real estate license at Keller Williams in the past. Been a licensed residential loan officer for about 8 years, not practicing anymore, but in 2012 is when I first learned about self-directed IRAs and the ability to buy real estate inside of a retirement plan. And when I learned about that, I thought, well, shoot, how come nobody taught me about this in all my other previous years in real estate? So I made a pendulum shift in 2012, and ever since 2012, I've been teaching investors how to use IRAs and 401ks to buy real estate instead of stocks.
Great. And Mike.
Hello everybody, Mike Del Pre, Executive Director of AZREIA. I started 14 years ago watching HGTV, it was HGTV, right? We all get excited to see those $80,000 checks while you're broke, right? So I got curious, went on YouTube, found 100 videos on how to wholesale real estate. I watched them and I applied them, made my first check in 2 months for $4,000, and I never quit since then. Became an AZREIA member 14 years ago, and just used the community of education, investors, networking, and ultimately had the opportunity to take it over 3 years ago.
And Ron.
In 2006, I was living in Europe for a number of years, and they changed the tax laws, so I ended up telling my wife, who panicked, we're selling our house, and it sold the following week. And we're moving, I don't know where yet, we're going to pick where, and then we're going to decide what we want to do when we grow up, because we're not going to be here. So she's in a tizzy, but we ended up as tax refugees back in the U.S., or for me back, for her was moving here. And I was open to doing what comes along, what makes sense financially. I'm an investor by background. First person approached me was losing their house. The owner was going to foreclosure. They were supposed to buy it through a lease option arrangement. I devised a lease-to-own program, which still is the core of our business. And then the second person approached me in basically this room, prior building, and said, would you help finance me on the mobile home flips I'm doing? And I said to myself, I call myself Ron, I said, Ron, if I can make a decent enough return and I can help somebody, hey, I'm a good Christian, why wouldn't I help them out? So that's what I did. That was the beginning of our lender solution, still core to what we do. So that was the beginning in 2007. Moved here, a couple clients gave me ideas, and we started the business.
Awesome.
Great. So the term wholesaling has become a word that is a little misunderstood. It's a little confusing. It's a little feared, depending upon where you are and when you've heard it. Can one of you please tell us what wholesaling is and contrast that to the larger term of investing?
Yeah, sure. So wholesaling real estate, you might hear it comes along with no money, no credit, no risk philosophy online, right? So what it is I wouldn't even say it has anything to do with houses. It's a sale of a contract. You're selling interest in paper. So you're going to a homeowner offering a price. They accept that price. You get it under contract. Then you go to the marketplace for like fix and flippers and landlords, and you add your fee, your profit, on top of that original price with the homeowner, and you sell your interest in that original contract through an assignment contract, and the end buyer ends up funding the entire deal. You're kind of in the middle, and you get that piece. So that's, in short, what wholesaling is. Any direction you want me to take this?
So as opposed to investing at large, the term investing.
Yeah, you're not even technically an investor. You're a sales and marketer. So that's all. It's a tool. Wholesaling. Ever hear the word flipping, right? So it's not flipping houses, or it's not a fix and flipper. It came from flipping paper. So it became a wholesaler is like a bird dog. Someone who would go find deals for the fix and flipper and the landlord, because a flipper and a landlord have a business model. They have crews, they're remodeling houses, they have tenants. They don't go out and find discounted properties. So wholesalers, or bird dogs, became wholesalers, and wholesalers were the people that find those deals, and that's why that's their value to the marketplace.
So I will tell you, one of the things you will find in investing is the terms sometimes, depending upon the marketplace, may have different meanings than what you may have known or learned earlier, and it may have become a different type of business. So Mike just described wholesaling as most people think of it today. When I began as an investor, wholesaling was quite simply, think the model of retail wholesale in sales and manufacturing. The wholesaler was the person who somehow got rights to or owned a property and wanted to sell it or sell the rights to that property to another person. They were quite literally the middleman. And bird dogging was something I did for a while, went out and found those deals, hated it, and couldn't wait until we got to the point where I could meet a wholesaler and I could afford to pay them their margin, so I didn't have to go do that job. It's just not my bailiwick. So understand that wholesaling for some people still means what it means to me, the middleman of the transaction. And during the last crash, we used to go to wholesalers and say, that house is going to come up on the sheriff's sale. I don't personally want to go down and bid on it, but I will pay a fee to you, the wholesaler, who's already going down to that sheriff's sale, and I will pay you to bid on this house that I really want. If you get it within my parameters, great. I will buy it from you, but I don't want it otherwise. And you would give them their parameters. That was one form of wholesaling, which I'm sure will come back again because we have a cycle in real estate and in financial networks. So you will see that again at some point too. So just understand that wholesaling can be different things, and it's generally a phrase for someone who's doing something where they're the middleman, like in the assignment of contract transaction Mike described, or owning it or helping you buy the one you want, like when they went to auctions.
Can I go over something
Sure.
why they're important?
Yes.
Because as a real estate agent, or even like I said, the flipper and the landlord, there's a sales skill set, or like a show of empathy to these homeowners and understanding as to what they're going through. Whereas I feel sometimes an agent, it's like when you could legally sell your house, let me know, I could list it. Versus the wholesaler takes the time and to consult them and walk them through negotiating liens, getting the proper probate attorneys to defer their payment to the end of to escrow, and getting very creative to get them into a position to be able to sell the house. So I know there could be a stigma out there of like, they're just low ballers, they're just trying to sign and make $5K. No, they're putting in all this front work to get the deal to the table.
Good. So before we start our discussion, particularly for those of you who are not in real estate and have never done investing, I wanted to go through 3 terms that you will hear when you listen to investors speak. So the first term is cash on cash return. Who would like to talk about that?
Me?
Ron?
Basically, how much cash am I going to earn on the cash I put in? And I want to earn a return. I am not going to put $200,000 in to buy a house or to buy an apartment building or anything else and sell it off for 180. That's a negative cash on cash return. That's a no-go deal. If I leverage the deal, that particular deal is even worse because I'm going to pay somebody interest on top of it. So I've got to look at how much money I'm putting in, I'm going to be spending through the process, and how much I end up. And you're generally looking for a cash on cash return of 5 or 10%, and the longer the deal, the higher that percentage is going to be because you're not getting that money as quickly. So that's basically what it is how much I put in versus how much I'm getting out at the end of the deal or during the deal and at the end.
And I'll add to that. I mean, when we talk about real estate inside of a retirement account, that's often a term used quite often, cash on cash return. Same thing with stocks. But there's a lot of different creative ways you can buy real estate in an IRA. An IRA can even leverage debt. I don't know if you guys know that. You can use your IRA, put a down payment down, and your IRA can borrow money from a bank. And that's oftentimes the terms we're using in our field is, will it give me better cash on cash return with my IRA leveraging dollars? So I think that's ultimately, if you're going to be an investor, probably one of the most important things you need to understand.
Mm-hmm. And the next thing is cap rate, also known as capitalization rate. What is a cap rate?
Well, I would say what's cash on cash, cap rate, and what's the third one? You ready to go over?
ROI, return on investment, yeah.
They're really just thermostats or measuring to what your money's worth to you, right, and your risk tolerance. So really, you're just using. There's just different like in a cap rate, there's usually a mortgage in place. It's the same thing as cash on cash, but it has a mortgage in place. So you're just going by your net income. So they're all really just thermostats that you need to evaluate your money and if it's worth the risk. I think everyone needs to understand that to put deals together.
Maybe I'd add one differentiator between the first 2 terms is on the cash on cash, you can leverage and get different returns. On cap rate, leverage doesn't count. You're looking at excluding the financing, what kind of return can be earned on this property on an ongoing basis. Generally used in the commercial arena, very seldom in residential, although some of the small apartments under 4 units will use it because they know other apartment investors are familiar with that term. So it's really washing out what expenses I absolutely have to have, taxes, insurance, and stuff like that, how much I'm getting in versus how much I paid in. And again, financing doesn't matter. Whether you have 100% financing or 0, your cap rate's going to be the same. It's excluding that part of it.
And to touch on what you said was important, in bigger deals, commercial, larger multifamily, you're going to find appraisals don't even count. That's how investors buy properties, through the cash on cash, the cap rate, the return on investment. Appraisals might be in there for the banks if they're involved in some way, but that's how you evaluate the property.
And that brings us to our last one, ROI, also known as return on investment.
Yeah, I think it just kind of goes, to me, it goes along the same as the first 2.
Yeah, it's almost the same as cash.
It's
on
another
cash.
metric,
Yeah.
another calculation, another formula, but it's really how much am I earning on this deal?
Yeah.
Real estate investors aren't getting commissions. Shocking. One of the key differences I'd mention while I'm mentioning that is real estate investors take risks. Every investor has risks. And as a matter of fact, the disclosures of the SEC is always all investments have risk. Realtors, agents, I'm going to call them generically, do not take that risk. Your only risk is you didn't get the deal, or it didn't happen, or you didn't get your commission, but you didn't put out $100,000 and take a $50,000 loss. I have.
So the important thing, if you decide you want to look more into investing, is to assess first yourself. What is your risk tolerance? And that will change over time depending upon what your abilities are, what your assets are, and what your thoughts of the marketplace are at the time. So that's the first thing. That's the first risk you have to assess, is your own abilities and your own tolerance.
I'll add one thing, and this is just more maybe in our field, but when you hear cash on cash return or return on investment, oftentimes they can be correlated to the same thing. But in my mind, cash on cash return is almost for the active investors. If I put X amount down and I sell it, what's my return? But then return on investment is more for the passive investors. Like I like to lend. If I lend somebody money, my return on investment is the interest payments they make me. So those are just how those are used in our industry.
That's good. Yes, thank you for that. So rather than do a strict Q&A, we're going to proceed, and I will name a tool, real estate, and one or more of our panelists will jump in and let you know how they use that tool and what that tool is, so you can start to get familiar with the conversation of the terminology and what the basic tool is. You're not going to walk away out of here today knowing everything about everything, but you should be conversant and at least recognize some of the terms and the uses of that tool. So we're going to start with novation. What is novation and how do you use it? That's you.
All right. It's been around a long time, but it's kind of, as you can know, it's probably getting popular, as you can see online and everything. So really, at the end of the day, when you have investors, we usually deal with people that need to sell, not want to sell, right? If they need to sell or they want to sell, they should have a real estate agent, 100%. There's always that 3% that just don't want their house, okay? They don't want to deal with the process of selling a house, having people come through the house, putting a sign out there. They don't want their neighbors to know that they're selling. There's all these unique scenarios. So sometimes they just have that net number. So what we might come in at 60 cents on the dollar, but that might not be a deal for that they want to participate in. So you might have to get up to 70%. Sometimes there's 10, 20 grand apart, but in order for us to take that risk, we need to be at 60 cents. So what the novation allows you to do is get in an agreement with them where you become a specific power of attorney with the homeowner, and it gives you the right to list the house. So what we would then do is work the numbers backwards. Okay, this could sell at $300,000, long as we got to cover all the agent fees, all the selling costs to sell the deal. We want to make a profit, and we got to net the seller their 70%. So basically, it's just more documents, just allowing you to facilitate the deal creatively without going with that low cash offer.
Okay. The next one is contract assignment or assignment of contract, depending upon how you want to look at it. It's the same thing.
Yeah, like I said, just like in wholesaling, assignment of contract, you're selling your interest in your original contract. Simple as that. And you can do it one time, you can do it 10 times, however. You guys heard daisy chains, right? You guys like those, I bet. So, so those happen, but it's legal and you can do it if the title company lets it happen.
So let's talk about. Can you guys talk just a little louder when you respond? Go ahead.
And Liz, I just add to that, assignment of a contract is different than an assignment of a note, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about. So don't confuse those two. Same word, different ending.
Right, and some of you may be familiar with, there are some relatively new laws concerning assignment of contract having to do with disclosure for if someone comes in and their intent is to assign the contract, notification to the seller and acknowledgement by them in writing that that is your intent to assign. The thing is, people don't know what that tool is used for, other than people know that people will sign a contract to make a profit. But for those of you who practice real estate, you may find that assignment contract can be a very helpful tool to you when you get into positions where, let's say, your buyer dies in the middle of a transaction. Contracts go beyond the person alive, right? They are longer lived. They are, until they're fulfilled, they are out there. Well, what happens if your seller needs to sell, your buyer just died, and now you're in a pickle? There's a lot of things that can happen, starting with canceling the escrow. But depending upon how far you are in that contract and what the needs of that seller are, you may actually be better off if you can find someone that you can assign that contract to. And what people have to understand is that contract assignment, the person who then gets that assignment, that signed contract, has to perform under the terms of that contract. So that's something that's very important. People think that all that contract term can change. No, it does not. That is a signed contract, and when you accept that, you accept the fact that you will perform under the terms of that contract. But that is a very useful tool when unfortunate things happen in a real estate transaction. All right, owner carryback.
I'll take that one, and that is one of many words behind the same concept. Now, notice that Liz used the term owner carryback. Some people use the term seller carryback. There is a difference. I don't use that term other than when we're talking about the contracting process on MLS. That's what the term is, it's carryback. I generally, when I'm talking to sellers or the buyers, I use owner financing or seller financing. They are different. I think it's a friendlier term, but they are, in essence, the seller is carrying back, or the owner is carrying back some of that money over time. They're accepting a down payment and then payments over time. How long they agree to keep, that's all an agreement piece. When I do them, I usually set them as a 30-year term. And people say, I want my money in 10 years. And okay, we will try. You might even get it paid off in 5. And at the end of 10 years, guess what they say? Don't pay me off. I love this income. Because I can't get that rate of return, the return on investment that I've got with you. So carryback is just a tool that allows the seller of the property to take a note, take the money over time, as opposed to all in one lump sum and put it in a CD earning a couple percent.
And there's tax advantages as well.
On the owner finance,
On the owner
not
finance.
on the seller, and there's one of the differences.
Yep.
Okay. And then options versus first right of refusal. What's the difference between those two tools?
Okay, an option is an obligation on the part of the person that is the optionor. You have an optionor and optionee. The person selling the property or selling the option has obligated themselves to perform under that option. The person that's buying the optionee did not take on an obligation. First right of refusal is very different in that it's kind of give me a chance to match a price, and if I can't match it, then go ahead and sell to them. It's a courtesy, it's an additional, it's helping somebody that can't immediately commit to something, but they're not committed really. It's kind of like the chicken involvement in the breakfast. All they did was lay an egg. They're still around, all right? So the option is, it's gone. They're gonna take it. If they decide to take it, they take it.
Can I go on?
Yes, absolutely.
Elaborate? So, what I like about options, you ever hear the phrase path of progress? Right, they're building a freeway down here. They're building a train to Tucson, right? So the options are a great way to where you can lock up the property or control the property. What Rockefeller say? Control everything, own nothing. So you use these documents to control things. So you can use an option to say, hey, I will pay you today's price on this house, and I'll execute it in 7 years, right? The seller must sell, buyer doesn't have to potentially buy. You guys ever hear of Disney? Walt Disney, maybe? So, what's in Florida, World or Land?
World.
You guys hear a story? So that's how he bought hundreds and hundreds of acres for Disney World in Florida. He had his sales team compile all the lots through options, because if everybody knew Disney was coming to Florida to build this theme park, do you think their price of their land would be the same? Nope. So he locked up hundreds and hundreds of acres through option contracts, and then once he had all the parcels together, he executed them all at once like dominoes. Next day, everything increased to like 100-fold or whatever it was. So, very creative tool.
I'll add this too. I have clients that buy or own options inside of, say, a Roth IRA. That's even an investment that you can do in an IRA. One of the things that works well because it's in an IRA is an IRA or a 401k has to give up some collateral as an investment, and consideration is required in order to have an option. So yeah, we even see it in the IRA world as well.
Awesome.
Great. So let's talk about two things put together. A lease with the option to purchase. What is that?
Okay, that's core to our business, so I'll answer that. Because I'm leasing a property to somebody, but I'm also, a separate document, giving them the option to buy an exclusive option. So mine are exclusive. Somebody could cheat on that, but I'm saying right in the document it's exclusive. You have the right to buy the property for 3 years at these prices. I do escalate them over time. The property's gonna be worth more 3 years from now than it is now. So we have that built in. They're getting some equity in the process, but we're also getting a part of that equity in the increase. In most cases, I lose because they end up earning more than I do. That's okay. So they are living in the property under a lease. And unless they default, they have the right to buy that property anytime in the next 3 years in our program. Again, somebody can set it up differently. 3 years is generally the limit legally that you want to deal with. You can extend it, but 3 years is generally accepted as a legal option. So put them together, and that's what helps people become homeowners. That's been the single biggest tool. Probably 80% of our clients are homeowners because of our lease option, lease to own program. Ours is integrated. At the end of 3 years, we'll finance you. At 2 years, if you have a down payment, we'll finance you. So that's how you can tie them together to give somebody both a place to live and the option to buy it. Disney wasn't going to live there. Our clients are.
So one of the things I want to stop a moment and talk about is you have now heard this a couple, 3 times from each of our panelists. Well, they will describe the tool and how they use it, but then they mention tax and legal considerations. One of the things you have to keep in mind is there's the tool and the mechanics of it, but you always want to have your own team of experts who can help you make decisions and make plans. And that is someone who is familiar with the tool, that is an attorney, that is an accountant, that's whoever you need on your team to help you apprise yourself of what you need to be thinking about so that you can construct terms of a contract that help you and then understand what the other party needs so you can help them. And the only way to do that is to build a team around you to help you with those considerations. So I just want to make sure you all are familiar with that and look at that. Yes.
Yeah, and what we say a lot in our world when someone's learning investing is like find an investor-friendly investor-friendly title company, investor-friendly accountant. Like you want an accountant that owns their own rental properties because they did everything possible to pay the least amount of taxes, so they're going to share that with you, right? So, and people like Direct IRA, the owners of the IRA with Nate, they have wealth plans, right? You got to create these wealth strategies to execute these tax ideas. Here at AZREIA, been around for 22 years, helping real estate investors. That's what our vendors, our business associates are. The attorneys are real estate friendly, the title companies. So when you bring a hairy deal to the title company with liens, encumbrances, judgments, 18 brothers and sisters that all hate each other, they're gonna walk through the process with you to get that deal to the closing table.
On
Yes.
that note, Liz, you're obligated by the Arizona Department of Real Estate, AZREIA, okay, to use a specific set of agreements. Why? If you're doing a lease option, you're going to go to Zoom or online and go find an agreement. You're looking for trouble. It might be legal in one state and it's not in another. So my business, I've been doing this for 17 years. I spent about $150,000 on legal costs to make sure my agreements are right.
Yes.
And we still improve on them.
Yeah.
Because lawyers don't know everything. But anyway, you'll learn, and you do adjust it as you learn. But don't go do Zoom or Google it and go find an agreement. Save yourself a buck.
Staples, that's my favorite.
Yeah, go to Staples. Save yourself a buck and cost you $2 million.
So just to clarify, the department does not have its own forms or anything like that. But what we do is when you, to your point, is when people complain, we're looking at, did you follow Arizona revised statute? Did you follow administrative code if that's pertinent? And did you follow case law? That's what we're looking at, is are you within the parameters of legal within this state in what you did? All right, purchase with lease back.
I will use that, especially in a foreclosure avoidance situation. I can give you numerous examples. Basically, the homeowner can't afford to live there. Well, their credit may not be good enough, or the market is tight enough, they can't find a rental place in a week. Because when the foreclosure date happens, they're gone, okay? They've got very limited time to get out of there. In many cases, we'll buy the property and we will give them an option to continue, or the right to continue to lease it. We'll sign them together, we'll buy the property and give them a lease for X number of weeks, months, whatever they need to live there. We do execute it as an actual separate lease. It's not just an addendum or a couple notes on a contract, because if they do not perform under the rental, guess what I need to do? Eviction, okay? And it's not because I'm a mean, awful investor. It's because I am a housing provider in that case, and I need to make sure that house comes back to us if you can't afford it. So anyway, that I'm combining two things. I'm buying their house, but I'm giving them a right to live there. And it's most commonplace for us is the foreclosure avoidance situation.
And if I can say something, when he said eviction, got a lot of response on that. So when the news comes out and says evictions are at an all-time high, only about 10% of those actually happen. Us real estate investors want it to work. We want to keep the tenant in, unless they're terrible, right? And they're ruining the property, because it costs us $2, $3, $4, $5 every turn. So if we could work something out with the family to, get them through the next few months, we'd rather do that.
Okay. And rental arbitrage.
Yeah, rental arbitrage. So basically, you're leasing. You're the one leasing the property from the owner, and then they allow you to sublease it. Simple as that. And the nickname is rental arbitrage because everyone wants to sell online courses. So I did that for 4 years off of Mill Avenue. A doctor, he owned a 7-unit building. He gave us 3 units and rented all at market. You're able to pay market rents, and then I subleased them as Airbnbs. So I didn't have to go buy the building or do anything like that. So it's another form of leverage again. So through a lease, I had the opportunity to rent. I think at that time it was like $800 a month for 1 bedrooms, and we were getting about $25 to $3,000 on Airbnb. So you just play the margins.
I'll just add, from a tax code perspective, both inside and outside of an IRA, arbitrage is more like running a business. You're not really owning real estate at that point. You could do that in an IRA, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense because the IRS still taxes us if we own a business in an IRA. So it is just looked at a little bit differently. You're more running a business when you're running arbitrage, I would say, than actually like buying a rental property, selling it, or renting it out.
I mentioned to Liz earlier that we don't really do this as a part of our business model, but of course I have a few that are that way. I've leased the property to a client who, Felicia happened to be there meeting him today, who has been leasing that property from us, he and his predecessor, for about 15 years. And he has a master lease with us, all 3 units. This is a 4-bedroom per unit type of place. And he then has a care home where he has 18 at the moment clients living there. So he's earning more on those clients than I am in terms of the master lease, but he handles everything. It's much like a commercial client in that case. And another one is, as Mike said, doing Airbnb, where he's leasing it. He wasn't in a position to buy it yet. He's leasing it from us, doing the Airbnb, building up some of his capital so that he can then switch to our lease to owner financing. So yes, it is one of those tools. You can lease and sublease, but you better have it in the agreement, or you will have a problem even getting the licensing for Airbnb if you don't have it in the lease. They're going to involve the owner.
So this goes all around, and we haven't said it out loud, but it goes to knowing property rights, because that's what you are basing all this on. What are the property rights you have? What are the property rights someone else wants to purchase or rent from you? It basically is what we're talking about. So remember, that's what your sort of baseline is. If you define what that is, that will help you determine what you need to do as far as your strategies go. Subject to, which is also known, the most common subject to is a wraparound mortgage. Let's talk about what that is.
I'll start by saying I hate those terms. I will never use those in public. In this closed group with investors, I know what we're talking about, and I may use them or they'll use them, and I don't shut them down. Use terms like owner financing, we will sign an agreement for sale, or we're setting up an installment sale. Any of those are acceptable. They are legally used terms. Subject to is one line in an agreement for sale. It confuses people. If I told a seller, I would like to buy this property subject to, the first question they'd have is, well, why don't we talk about subject 1 first? What's the price? So subject to the average population means nothing. And I do not like, and I'm actually going to try to push to get our AZREIA members to stop using those terms in public. Okay, there are words you use and maybe profanities you use among friends and family. That's one of those I would consider you don't use outside. Wrap, same thing. Confuses people, shuts them down. Imagine somebody getting calls from 5 different investors. One wants to do a subject to, another one wants to do a wrap. Somebody else was talking about a cash deal done in installments. they're gonna probably contact the Arizona Department of Real Estate and says, look, I'm not in charge of that stuff, but why don't you ask them what they're really talking about? Or why don't you call Ron? That's what they're probably gonna do. But anyway, those are just terms for owner financing. They are not seller financing, they are owner financing concepts.
Yeah, so it's subject to existing mortgage. So you'll buy the property subject to that mortgage. So basically, as investors, we're not assuming their mortgage. I know there's programs out for that. We're making payments to the bank on their behalf. That's something that has to be very clear. And they also need to understand that it stays on their credit. So the bank, there's two different instruments. It's the title of the house and then the mortgage, right? So we're just gonna make the payments to the mortgage as it stays in their name, and the title comes into our name, and we take over ownership.
Good. And then let's do contract for deed, which has many other names as well. Graduated sale, that type of thing. So why don't we start out with what that animal is, and then the different terms people will hear for that.
Right, contract for deed is indeed the same as the subject to is and wraps and owner financing. It's just another term it's used, or that's probably the most common word used around the country. In Arizona, the contract is called an agreement for sale. Use that term, okay? If a note investor is buying a note and it's a contract for deed, that note investor, informed enough, will know that's what we're talking about. It's an owner financing deal. It's probably in a different state, because there are very few contract for deeds in Arizona, or even agreement for sale, that people will sell. Arizona's a great market. Why the hell would you sell it, okay? So it is just another term. A land contract is if you go to a title company, hand them a land contract, they're gonna say, can't be done. Put some different headings on there, include the wording from an agreement for sale, everything's kosher. That document is recorded, and the terms of that document are recorded. So it's fairly open book, but that's the terminology to use. Use owner financing, which people understand, or seller financing in other cases. These are all owner financing concepts. They do have tax advantages. It sounds scary that you're gonna make the payments on somebody's mortgage. We have. Check our BBB rating. We're an A+, 17 years doing this. Nobody's been screwed. Can it happen? You bet. So be careful who you're dealing with.
On the contract for deed, look at it like when you buy a car, right? You get a loan from the bank at the car lot, but you don't get the title to the car until you finish paying it off. So that's a contract for deed. So you cut a deal, you make payments, and a lot of you're gonna start noticing the differences in these from owner carryback, subject to. It also comes into use rights. So you have the right to use the house on an owner carry. You have the right to use the house on a subject to. You don't have the right to use the house on an option. You don't have the right to use the property on a contract for deed.
And I'll just back up just a little bit, just kind of add some foundation of why you even hear these terms. At least, these are what I hear from my investors that buy property subject to, sorry to curse, subject to with their IRA, being the buyer, is that usually that owner is in a distressed situation. The house is not the problem, it's the mortgage that's the problem. They can't afford to pay the mortgage, they have no equity in the property, they're between a rock and a hard place, they're 2 weeks from foreclosure, and they're looking for solutions. So that's kind of why you hear it. You're not offering, subject to terms on somebody that's got a bunch of equity that's just trying to sell, but it is for the situations where you're trying to solve a problem, and sometimes you got to get creative to solve that problem.
So let's go to the tool that you are most familiar with, which is using an IRA to
Boring stuff, yeah.
the IRAs to buy real estate. Okay, talk to us about what that is and why I would use it, and give us some examples.
So let's just define it so everybody in the room understands what an IRA is. It's just an individual retirement account. Pretty much anybody with earned income can have an individual retirement account. Most people don't realize, though, since the mid-'70s when IRAs were created, you can own anything in an IRA except life insurance contracts and collectibles. Those are the only two investment restrictions not allowed in an IRA. Most people just think they can buy stocks, bonds, and mutual funds because they're IRAs with Fidelity or Charles Schwab, and they're a licensed securities broker that sells investment products. So you just think those are my only options. No, those are your only options with Fidelity. When you look at an IRA, by tax law, you still have to have a custodian that holds the assets in your IRA until you take distributions. But there's companies like us, Directed IRA, that we don't have a list of investments to sell you. our account agreement when you set up an IRA with us, which is no different than an IRA at Fidelity, even though we call it self-directed, but our account agreement just says, we'll be the custodian of your IRA, but you got to tell us what the investment is. You got to show us what the investment is. And we'll buy it in the name of the IRA. We'll show you what documents we need to own it in the IRA. But all we do at Directed IRA is we exchange IRA assets of cash for assets of real estate, just like Fidelity exchanges IRA assets of cash for stock. Most advisors, and even I had a conversation with a guy today, thought that you had to take a distribution out of your IRA if you wanted to buy real estate with your IRA funds. Not true at all. You just have to find a company that will facilitate the buying of the investment and the selling of the investment, so everything's in the name of the IRA or 401k. So when you understand those rules, now you think, okay, my IRA can own real estate. What type of real estate? Anything that's an investment, anything that's a rental property, a fix and flip, investment into a syndication, multifamily, land, subject to all the creative things. The only thing you're not allowed to do is the IRS doesn't want us to live in the properties owned by our IRA or have our IRA buy our own investments, self-deal with our IRA. So it's very powerful, and I would say everybody in this room, if your knowledge is in real estate, you should think about taking your own IRA first and investing in what you're knowledgeable about. But also, if you're an agent, you can double up your sales by understanding that you can sell more real estate to your clients by saying, hey, you just relocated to Phoenix from Iowa. I know you got a new job. What are you doing with that old 401k? Are you rolling it to Fidelity, or would you like to buy a rental property and roll that IRA to Directed IRA? So as an agent, there's a lot of different ways you can benefit from understanding how self-direction works for yourself on how to grow your own IRA with self-directed IRAs and investing in real estate, but also how to sell more real estate by understanding you can use your clients' IRAs to own real
I have
estate.
a question. So I know wholesalers where they put their assignment fees into their IRA.
Yeah.
Can they put their commissions?
They can't put commissions, so you can't put commissions. It has to be investment earnings.
Got
And
it.
I'll just say this: I'm not up here to say wholesaling is good or bad or make a determination on that. I will tell you, the tax code doesn't prevent anyone from wholesaling in an IRA. Now, there are some tax attorneys that will make arguments as to whether or not flipping a contract is actually owning an investment, like owning a piece of real estate. There's some arguments there, but there's no tax law we can go off of that says you can definitely not wholesale in an IRA. So can you set up an IRA at Directed IRA, have your IRA as the buyer on the contract, have Directed IRA send the earnest money to the title company and then assign it to somebody else and have the wholesale fee or assignment fee come to the IRA? By tax law, yeah, you can't do that.
So I think it's, go ahead.
Isn't that why a self-directed 401k can be a better means of buying and selling real estate, because you don't have to have the approval? You can do it yourself.
So if you're working with an IRA, right, through us, you have to run the investments through us.
Right.
When you have, and I think you're referring to a solo 401k in most cases, if you have a solo 401k, that's another plan that we set up for people. But with a 401k, you are the plan administrator. The investments don't have to come through us, so that's one of the advantages of having a solo 401k. But there's also some other advantages, I would argue, that make the solo 401k far superior than an IRA. But not everybody can have the solo K, because you have to be self-employed with no employees in order to qualify for one.
Thank you.
Well, and one thing that's really important to know about investing inside your IRA is that titling has to be a particular way. There's particular phrasing. It's not your name. That it's because it's in the IRA. That IRA owns that property. Even though you're directing it and managing it, you have to understand that. So make sure that you guys call yourselves
us.
Intermediaries? What do you guys call it?
We're a custodian. We're a licensed
Custodians.
custodian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Custodian. Make sure you talk to your custodian about how to fill out that form when you go, or make that offer, so that you have the correct titling and you don't end up upsetting yourself.
And I'll tell you what the titling is. It's very simple. It's the custodian name, FBO, so it'd be Directed Trust Company, that's us. FBO stands for the benefit of, your name, IRA. That's the legal entity that's going to be the buyer. An IRA is a trust by definition, and that would be the name of the trust. If you ever had Fidelity send you the stock certificates owned in your IRA with them, it would say Fidelity Investments FBO, your name, IRA. So it's no different. It's just a different name And that's where self-direction comes in, is you're still out there negotiating deals and finding deals for your self-directed IRA. We're not going to find them for you. The only difference is when you have the buyer on the contract, it's not you, it's not your LLC, it's your IRA. You send the contract to us, we sign the contract, we send the earnest money directly to the title company, we send the final funding to the title company. So it's not a distribution to you. We're not handing the money to you because that would be taxed and penalized. We're just sending the money straight to third parties based on you sending us a contract in the name of your IRA.
And you can use the IRA investment as, it can buy part of a property. The big thing there is that whatever portion, let's say that your IRA is buying 20% of that rental property, it also has to incur 20% of the profits and 20% of the expenses. So it means you have to have very careful accounting, which is why you want to talk to your custodian and your accountant about making sure you have set up your books correctly so that you don't jeopardize what you've done.
And sorry, I just want to add one thing. The reason why you see partials like that, it's not because someone's buying it 20% in IRA and then Mike's in the deal. It's usually, I have a wife, I've got 3 kids, I've got a brother, and we're partnering 5 or 6 IRAs together to own one rental property. That can be done. There's going to be multiple buyers on the buyer line. There's going to be multiple names on the warranty deed. But when the income comes in, it has to be split pro rata based on how much each plan put in. There's also a solution to make that easier too. We set up what's called IRA-owned LLCs. Mm-hmm. You can have an LLC created by a law firm. We can have the IRAs first own the LLC and have a pro rata share of the LLC. And that makes it easier. The LLC would just go buy the investments from that point forward. So either way you can do it, but that's why you see partials, is because most people are partnering different plans together to get all of them moving, and they're investing in the same asset.
Great, thank you. And then the next thing we're going to talk about is buying and selling notes. Who wants to speak to that?
I'll take it on, another core piece of our business. We may buy a property, however, very often with owner financing, but there are some renovations. We might do expansions in some case. So we will place a note, a second note on that property that one of our investors will then buy. They might do the actual loan at the time of the transaction. More often, we'll do the loan from our own funds and then sell that note. So it doesn't sound really scary. Has anybody had their mortgage sold, let's say by Chase, to Nation Star? That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
The difference is those transactions are done interbank. They're done, MERS is the holding place for all the titles and deeds and all of the documents. In the private world, that doesn't exist. We don't have MERS. We actually have the documents, which we share with the potential buyer. They take a look at it, they review it, but they then can buy that note and get the return that we had set up on that note. So most of our investors, that's how they're making money with us. And most of our investors have done very well. It's part of our goal. So you can buy notes. Don't call Bank of America. They won't even know who to send the call to. And when they finally get it to somebody, they'll say, I have no idea what you're talking about. But there are note exchanges, groups that talk about this, that share what they're doing. And folks like ourselves that will actually sell our individual notes. We'll buy some back if somebody needs to get out of it. We can't guarantee a turnaround time that tomorrow we'll buy it. These are not as liquid as buying stock. A $200,000 note does not trade on the stock exchange. All right, that's handled between the two parties. There might be an escrow agent, it might be a third party that makes sure that the money transfers at the time the transfer's due. So it is no different than Chase selling to Mr. Cooper or Nation Star, same thing. It's done all the time. And just to give you some context, the real estate market is huge, trillions, right? The bond market is 1.7 times as large. And the largest market in that arena is mortgages. There are more mortgages out there than there are bonds. Now, if you want to go one step further, it's currencies. Most of you don't deal with currencies, you only know one. It's the US dollar. I've lived in that world, and that is a huge market. That happens overnight, 24 hours a day. But, so mortgages are out there. They are, you can buy them, you can sell them, you can sell them at a discount, you can, so that you get, the buyer gets a higher return. A lot of different things. You can buy a performing note or a non-performing note. It's in foreclosure, and I'll sell it to you at a discount because I don't want to deal with foreclosure. I wouldn't, but somebody else will. I'll buy those in discounted notes. I'll get it through the modification process, get them back to on their feet, and work through it.
Yeah, and it's actually a bigger investment in our industry than just owning real estate. A lot of people just like to put their IRA in the place of the bank and have the borrower pay interest tax-free to the IRA. There's a huge pendulum shift if you're looking to invest in notes or be a lender. There's not a lot of tax advantages to being a lender outside of an IRA, but there's a ton of tax advantages inside of an IRA, and it's also very passive. So that's actually a huge investment in what we call the alternative asset industry, is owning notes secured by real estate. I mean, it's basically like owning a stock, but you have collateral in case the stock doesn't pay you. You've got the house. So it's actually a phenomenal retirement investment, I think.
Yeah, a lot of our investors do use their IRAs. Now, if you want to get your dander up, they are investing tax-free. Doesn't that sound like a loophole? That's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
A loophole is you didn't understand how they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's what a loophole is. It's in the tax law, it's legal, and somebody is taking advantage of it. You're not.
Ron, please can you tell us a little bit about performing and non-performing notes? I always have issues.
Performing versus non-performing notes, that's your question. Okay.
Yeah, a performing note, most of what we do, our client is paying us every month, and that note is getting paid every single month. If somebody defaults, the borrower on that note defaults, that property is now non-performing. No payments are going to the note holder. Note holders tend to panic, okay? Oh my God, what do I do? All right, and they might have a servicing agent like ourselves handle it. Most of the notes we sell, we handle. That's another story. But somebody in their IRA, they're not stressed because they're not getting the income. They just worry about, will I get my money back? What do I have to do with this thing? I might have to sell the property. I might have to do the foreclosure. So the performing note is 99% of the market today, not in 2007. And the non-performing are those that are in default. They stopped paying, all right? Very often, that's a short period of time. It's kind of like evictions. If the housing provider helps them through the situation, they come back on. It might be that they pay a smaller amount and catch up. Same story with a non-performing note. It can be made performing again. It may be giving them some, the amount of money they're due might put it at the end of the loan. There's a mortgage modification that I can do just like a bank can do. All right, banks follow too many rules, but anything can be done to help the person that owns that property who is borrowing. So the non-performing note is just those that are in trouble.
Yep.
And they happen.
Yep.
So let's take notes and talk about what's one example of how you could use this in your own life. If you are an owner of a house and you want to sell it, and the person who wants to buy it can't quite come up with enough of a down payment to actually be able to afford the monthly payments, they're coming up with 3 or 5%, but they really need more like 20%. You could, as the owner of that property, as part of that sales contract, do an owner carryback. But let's say you don't want to hold that note for the 5 years or the 7 years or the 10 years of the term. You could sell that note into the note market, and that way you have cash coming back in. There are terms of the note market that the note market's looking for that you would want to craft that note around so that you have a sellable note within that note market. So now you're thinking of a couple of different things, not just the real estate market, but the note market, and crafting your contracts and your note to what will work. So that's one example that you see people do quite frequently. So I just want to give you that example. Go ahead.
And the note market includes self-directed IRA investors. They love buying notes in their IRA. And I don't know if you guys know, but there's $44 trillion in retirement plans. That's the biggest bucket of money out there, bigger than any bucket of money anybody has in their own bank account. So if you can learn how to navigate and understand that IRAs and 401ks can buy real estate and notes, I mean, that's a game changer for you guys.
There's a hand over there, I think. Yeah.
I have a question. Where would you find a template for terms and conditions for a seller finance of a property?
Title company has templates.
Okay.
I highly recommend you have a real estate lawyer review it, okay? Their templates are very long to kind of cover everything to do a CYA for the title company. Is it fair to both the buyer and the seller? I don't know. I have never used their templates, okay? We developed our own, but there are templates out there. I would start with a title company. At least it's a legal document, and they will title insure it. As a matter of fact, on the note market, there's probably the most important factor on a note. I can't sell it to another investor if it's not title insured. So when you're doing that owner financing deal or carry back, make sure it goes through a title company. Otherwise, it's gonna be hard to sell that note. You're carrying it, and I don't mind carrying them, but I mean, say, if you do want to sell that note to leverage to go buy another property or 10 more properties or 20 more properties.
And understanding that that is negotiable, where would you see that, kind of the current interest rate and down payment, and all that kind of good stuff?
Okay, I can tell you mine. There is no standard.
Okay.
If I'm an owner selling my property and I want to sell it, again, it depends on my urgency, I might sell it for the same interest rate I have on my main mortgage. Okay, that would be a starting point. In our case, we're charging our clients 8.5%. It's slightly above, if you will, mortgage rates, because my investors earn a heck of a lot more than the Fed charges the banks, okay? So that's kind of the range I would think about. If somebody says, well, you should be able to get 12%, find a new friend.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move on to legally affixing a structure to the land.
I've been there. This is mostly in the manufactured home world, although in the intro, Liz had mentioned you could divorce the two, where the property is now chattel, it's called. It's a recreational vehicle done through DMV, and the land is by itself. If you have a mobile home in a park, by definition, they are separated. And there's nothing you're going to do about it because the park is making a ton of money. Hint. So if you really want to earn some big money, do the parks. And nobody controls how much you charge other than your clients eventually leave you. And it's hard to leave. But anyway, when we're finding, I can't provide a mortgage on a home that is just sitting on another piece of land. Even if they own the land, that's not a mortgage. I need to have it legally affixed, and that's different. Somebody said, oh yeah, it's affixed. It's been there for 12 years. And you can't move it, there's no wheels or anything. That is physically affixed, or maybe physically placed on the land, but legally affixed. It is a process. You go through the Maricopa County assessor's office. There's a division that specifically deals with manufactured homes, and get that property, that RV attached to the ground. You no longer have two tax bills, it becomes one tax bill. Now you can take a mortgage. Changes the value of the property when it's affixed legally, because now you can take mortgage and your buyer can take a mortgage. Otherwise, they're dealing with an RV loan.
And it also, the term changes in the tax code too, is when it's not affixed to the ground, it's not considered real estate, it's considered personal property. When it's affixed to the ground, now it's real estate. It even affects if you do that in your IRA. You can do either. The difference is when you buy and own personal property in an IRA, your IRA's got to pay tax of the lease income it generates. As soon as you fix it to the ground, it's now real estate, and all of the income is tax exempt.
And not just because it's recorded affixed doesn't mean it's tied down to the ground. So it's a whole another $5,000 process you got to add to this. So in order to get the loan, it has to be tied down. And also the other magic number in the mobile home world is 1976, because the banks won't lend prior to that. So then now we're talking value, issues, right? So you can get cheaper properties below 1976, but they can get loans after 1976.
Bank loans.
Bank loans.
So then the other thing was, as I had mentioned in the beginning, and Ron just alluded to, the splitting of the structure from the land. In that transaction, we had a stick-built tract home from the 1960s, and we were able to, once again, legally, we separated the structure from the land so that we had ownership in the house for the young couple, and we had the original owner of the property was still owning the land. And it went on to a land lease for that couple in the house, and they paid according to that land lease. In this case, that particular homeowner wanted to make sure that young couple had fee simple title, and so it was her way of giving them a mechanism to gently over time acquire the land rights as well as the structure rights, so they had full fee simple. For her, we created that land lease with a 5-year period that had big incentives for them to come up with the money to buy the land. That was important to her, that they own that. And then if they'd gone back past the 5 years, there were graduated increases to that land lease, but still incentives for them to own the land. So just know that these things can be attached and unattached physically as well as legally to help you get where you need to go for a transaction for both parties to win.
And internationally, that's used very often.
Yeah.
Very often you have a 99-year lease. The house I bought in Europe, all I did was own the house. I had a lease on the land. Now it was a long enough lease, I didn't worry about it, but they eventually gave us the right to buy it. But it is used a lot in other countries. It's used less here. Again, somebody usually is willing to do, in our case, a lease option, because they had, even though they can't deduct the interest they're paying on, or that they would if it's their house, they have the right to buy the whole thing. And so this way, it also gives them time, and they own the right to buy that property. I can't take it away from them. You can't come in with $1 million offer and I give it to them. So from that standpoint, that's what we would tend to use. We wouldn't tend to split them up.
Right.
But that's our preference, our business model.
And that's what's so great about this, is once you understand the rights and the tools, you can mix and match to the situation depending on the people who are involved and what their needs are.
Did we discuss masters?
No, go ahead.
There's also a master lease, so you'll also get familiar with that more in the multifamily world. So simply, if it's a 20-unit building, you can get a master lease, just like a lease option. You're just having the right over all the units, everything under the roof. You just lease out, and you just structure a lower rental rate. You go in there, you revitalize the property, and you raise rents, and you get the difference. So you can, without buying the 20-unit building, you could take control with the master lease.
And that same tool can be really useful for small office buildings. That's a perfect, I had an investor one time I worked with, and that was what he liked to do, to rehab one that had some of that, so it wasn't dilapidated or anything like that. It just had deferred maintenance issues and perhaps was not renting at market rates or to the capacity it could. And that was one of his favorite tools. It worked out for everybody. Everybody got to have what they wanted in the end. All right, let's go to life estate sales.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them. We don't use them. We probably will someday. It's basically selling your house while you're living in it. This would be an older person, and the buyer is buying it kind of at today's market or a discount today's market, because they're going to own that property and take care of it with getting no income in the meantime. So they might be thinking, hopefully they'll die in the next 5 years. And of course, that's the person that lives to 120. So it is a way, and families could use this as a way to sell the property earlier. Now mom and dad don't have, or maybe mom's left because they always wear out the spouse. But moms last longer, okay? It's obviously, got to have a little humor here. But with that, that's a way that mom can sell the property to one of the kids or all the kids. So they own it and they take care of the maintenance. She gets to live for free. But they do buy the property at today's rate, and they don't have to deal with it at probate and all of that stuff. They're already the owner, and they make sure that mom's taken care of. Doing it with a third party is less common. We will hope to do that, and I think our reputation will allow us to, where we could allow somebody to do that. It's another version of a reverse mortgage. And I learned from Liz the other day that that came before the reverse mortgage. The reverse mortgage is something realtors would not deal with. How do I earn a commission on a reverse mortgage? On this you could if you help put the transaction together, all right? So sorry for the tunnel vision, I just know a lot of agents. And so with that, it's another way to transfer title, but stay in the property. You don't have to rent it from your kids. You're not paying any mortgage. You're not paying any maintenance costs. That's the kid's problem, or the new buyers.
See, I'm already getting excited. I want to go out and do a deal. It's like, they're like I never done that personally, but start thinking of how you can use these tools. So this situation, you lock in today's price, right, or lower, whatever it may be. And yes, you have to invest and give them money up front, but they may live 5, 10, 15 years. What happens to a house every 10 years? Doubles. That's all I'm saying. Like, that's a win. That's like,
Yeah.
as agents, I will say you guys have first access to these deals before us three.
Well, it's not, you're not in a negative equity position like you would be in a reverse sometimes.
The owner, that's
Yeah.
correct. You're
Yes.
absolutely correct.
Yeah,
No, there's
right.
other events.
So
By the way,
it's
nobody
advantage.
said we can't do a life estate sale without that it can't have a carryback.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
mom now has an income instead of a lump sum, which the kids are gonna want part of. But if she's getting the income now, medical bills taken care of, all that kind of stuff, from money the kids are paying her because they own the property with financing at a reasonable rate.
So-
yeah, pretty exciting stuff.
So you're creating a note.
I think I just did a deal. Okay.
So you create a note,
Yes.
right?
Sure.
So once again, multiple tools. He creates the note, records it against the property,
Yep.
right? So then you can go and sell that note on the market if you like, right? So just so many ways, or even if we go back to the owner carry part, if you structure an owner to carry the note, what we like to do is put the first right of refusal on their note. So if they ever chose to go out to the market and sell their note to liquidate their cash, they would have to call us first, and then now we know we have an opportunity to buy it at a discount.
So the thing with the life estate is, and this is proven out over time as I have watched this marketplace, is you go to the bank and the bank has very federalized rules they have to keep within. You're probably going to end up for that person getting them about 40 to 45% of market value. Then you go to an investor, and a lot of times an investor will come in somewhere in that 60 to 70% of market value, depending upon how that transaction is structured. But you go to the family, and now you're talking about 80, 85% plus, because it's mom, it's grandma, it's whoever, right? So the family will do that for more. The point is that you have a tool that can help these folks. And when we were going through the crash, this was a tool that I encouraged investors to use to help the 98-year-old who was living in Sun City and they'd literally run out of money because their life had gone on longer than their possible savings had, right? They had been very frugal people, but they just lived longer than was anticipated. And things like electric bills go up, and things like not in Sun City, but property taxes and certain other things go up. And all of a sudden, your 98-year-old, your 95-year-old, your 97-year-old, they still want to live in their house. And quite frankly, physically moving someone like that into another residence can be quite upsetting to them physically, mentally, and emotionally. So you can help them preserve the ability to be there in their home that they have known. That was a great tool to help these folks. Go ahead.
One thing to be very cautious of, though, too, when you get that sick, is if that elderly person gets to a point where they need assistance from the state or something, when you do one thing to help them, you can actually be putting them in a situation where they now lose their availability to services, because now they sold their house, so they have that. If their name is on the deed, when they pass, the family can be forced to sell that property to pay those services back. So
Well,
get that person's name off of the deed.
In a true life estate sale, they're not on title.
They're not on the deed.
They're not on title.
Okay.
And you're right, especially in timing and things like that, you have to be very careful. That's consideration, absolutely. So back to a good tool, but make sure you're using it at the appropriate time in the appropriate way.
And
Yeah.
if I could, sorry.
Oh, and I was gonna say, and just be careful, talk to a friendly IRA custodian before you do that deal in an IRA. Because there are certain family members an IRA cannot benefit. And it's usually yourself, your spouse, parents, kids.
Sure.
Outside of that, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews, they're not considered disqualified to an IRA, but there are certain people the IRS says, no, we don't want you or your spouse or your parents or your kids benefiting from the IRA's investment. So it's probably just one of the ones you don't want to mix family and IRAs together. Call me, talk to me before you do something like that.
Good
So it
point.
doesn't matter if they have an LLC, but the family members are all the managers and members?
Yeah, LLCs are just an extension of those people. So
That's what I thought.
ultimately, general rule of thumb, the IRS just doesn't want us self-dealing our IRAs with certain family members, but family to the side are actually not disqualified or prohibited.
Okay, revocable trusts.
Okay. This comes up when most people have heard terms like a land trust, because they read it on the internet. I want to do a land trust. I'm going to put the property into a land trust. And they go to a title company and say, I want to do that. Title company says, not allowed in Arizona. No such concept here. That doesn't mean you can't use the same document, plus or minus a few words, where the word land gets changed with revocable. Okay? We do have some properties that are LLCs manage and trustees of that are in trusts. It's not the usual situation, but there are some transactions, I won't get into the details, where legally a title company can't handle certain things, or that we've got Garden St. Germain protection under, and again, if we're talking legal terminology, I don't want to get into the weeds, but the trust can be a useful vehicle in a lot of cases, especially in the owner financing arrangements. So we will use them in those cases, but don't try to call it a land trust. Don't go to documentation with that, and especially if you don't do a title company, you're going to end up with a problem eventually in trying to close, take loans on, or anything else in a land trust that's not allowed in Arizona. Some states allow them. It's a wording issue, okay? Learn what works in Arizona and use that.
Okay, good. And equity sharing,
So like partnerships?
Yep.
any kind
Yeah.
of equity sharing, yeah.
Do you want me to give like an example
Sure.
of doing that? Okay.
Sure.
So when we say equity sharing, I like to say, you ever hear, you can buy houses with no money, right? So this is the key way of doing it, is borrowing money from other people. Other people's money, other people's properties, other people's resources, other people's knowledge, other people's everything. So when you want to do a deal, maybe I'll use the board. When you want to do a deal, what's a fair deal?
Big deal, a bigger
You'll
one.
never do a deal? 50-50 handshake. Is that what you hear?
Yeah.
Right, it's common. And if you could start to see the trend of how we're talking, it's wipe the slate clean. That's out the door. Any rule of thumb or standard way of doing anything, we don't operate that way. It's a blank slate on every single deal with every single person. So now think about taking all the tools that we just talked about to acquire, enter into deals, or even exit deals. Now it's like, okay, I have a carryback, or I want to, bring a down payment to the table, but these tools are cool, but I don't have the money. So we use other people's money, right? So that's the key. So ultimately, I would try to say 90% of our rentals and all our flips were done with $0 out of pocket. Acquiring the property, the renovations, holding costs, everything. And then this is a simple way to show you how to do that. So there's 4 parts of a real estate deal that I wish I knew a long time ago. The first one is appreciation. Familiar with that? Look at appreciation like icing on the cake, or if you have those hot cookies from Oregano's and someone puts ice cream on top, it just starts to melt away. You got it for a little time, grab it while you can. And as investors, the only thing that we invest in is what we control. Okay, so what can we do? We could force the appreciation, right? We go in there as fix and flippers, bathrooms, kitchens, all that stuff. We could phase the appreciation. We're going to add 1,000 square feet onto this. We're going to buy this commercial building and we're going to put a cell phone tower in there and increase the income and the value of the property. But we find it like a wholesaler. You just buy it super deep, right? That's how we look at appreciation. We never go by the emotion of the market, whatever the government's doing or whatever is the hot trend. We don't get excited about that. So appreciation is one part of a deal. And next one is depreciation, right? Anyone hear of straight line depreciation? Right, you could write your property off right off the bat for 27.5 years without even losing any money. You could start taking losses on a property. So when you hear not just like poor people have problems, rich people have problems. It's usually a money problem. So they use the tax code with houses to save money. So you got depreciation, and then we got cash flow. Everyone like cash flow?
Of course.
Gross rents minus expenses equals NOI. Anyone know what that is?
That operating income. That's
Okay,
the
that-
cap rate.
And like going towards the cash on cash, I paid $100,000 for the property out of my pocket. You stop here, but then most of us, we get a loan of some sort. It's a debt service mortgage payment. So minus your debt service, and that's your true cash flow. And I'll say the average investor likes to look for at least a net of $300 per single family property. If it doesn't match that formula, it's probably not gonna be a good deal at some level. So you can help your investors just with that. Then there's the amortization schedule. Anyone have a mortgage calculator? How many mortgage calculators are on your phone right now? All right, every single person in here should have a mortgage calculator. That's how everything we've talked about, seller carryback, subject twos, creating all these notes, you have to have a down payment, an interest rate, what's called 30 years, 10 years, all this stuff, all needs to be calculated. So I call this amortization because you could be the bank, basically. There's some people that don't want any part of the deal. You could either do, going into equity sharing, getting to it now, is you could be in a joint venture LLC with somebody. So you and I could both be in an LLC, and the operating will state how we participate in the deal, okay? Or you could be the bank where you would say, hey, I will lend you the money, and I want streams of cash, so I want 5% on my 100 grand for the next 10 years because I just want to grow my IRA, right? So Nate would have his clients would invest in me through their IRA because I'm the operator flipping the deals. So these are 4 ways you can break up a deal. So the first thing we do when we sit down with an investor is an investor identity interview. So who are you as an investor? Do you want lumps of cash or streams of cash, right? So if they want streams of cash, what box do you think they'll pick?
Amortization.
One of the bottom two.
Bottom 2, right? What box would you pick? If you had to pick one box.
Depends on the house, I guess. Probably.
You're a real estate guy. Just pick one. What would you do?
Let's go to amortization.
I knew it because he's younger. See, he's more aggressive, more risky, right? So he's like, I want the upside, right? So now, when I say to my lender, I'm telling you how to raise money very easily. What box fits you, right? Some people said cash flow or aggressive, I want that. So now that's how I'm gonna base my negotiation. So no 50-50. So if it's someone that wants, like a high income earner, that wants streams of income and just wants to write off, I could do a joint venture. And we would, in the operating agreement, we would say, hey, okay, you want long-term cash flow, you just want to own the house for your depreciation and all this stuff, I'll give you, 80% of the cash flow. I'll take 20%, or excuse me, I'll give you, where am I at here? So he wants the cash flow, okay, so you get what I'm saying, so we could say, we could split that up. If I'm gonna give him more of the cash flow for the 5-year deal that we do, or whatever time frame, I want 80% when we sell, because I'm gonna defer the cash flow every month on the property, so when we sell, I want the upside. So you get the upside now. Then the depreciation, very risky, talk to an accountant, because you don't want tax evasion, but you could also separate the depreciation. Maybe they get a little bit more depreciation because they're a high income earner, and I don't care about it right now because I have my own rental properties, whatever it may be. And you wouldn't work on this one. So you would split the deal, breaking these 3 up in the operating agreement. Or you just say, hey, they want nothing to do with the property, then I would just give them this box and say, hey, just be my bank, and I'll give you X return. So that's how I equity share or create agreements with multiple people. So there's people there's different lists of people that fund the flips, and there's a different list of people that help buy the rentals. So that's how I bring it.
I really like that, and from a government employee thing on a fair deal, proper disclosures and a clear way of explaining yourself to the consumers, what I call a fair deal, because everybody has a different need. And what we see a lot at the Department of Real Estate is like, investors all day long, you guys want to make money, right? But the consumer hasn't been explained to, because the person that's trying to use these tools has not vetted the tools through an attorney or had their team of legal defensibility like the people on this panel. And so we run into issues where all we see is the predatory side, where the good side can really help someone if you could just clearly define, I'm going to make money on this, but it gets you in a better position. Do you want to do this or not?
Yeah.
And so clear disclosures is a perfect world, in my opinion.
What's great about this is so when you're raising the money and you're like, I want full acquisition, I want all the renovations, I want to be zero out of this for the entire project, right? I don't have a presentation, I don't have a slide deck. This literally happens on a notebook or literally a napkin or scribbling on a Panera table somewhere. So then you just take this, and literally I learned this, Nate, from Mark and Matt. They probably helped create this.
Yeah.
And you just give it to your attorney and say, put this in the operating agreement. So the money I'm raising is paying for the attorney's time as well. So you don't have to worry about, I don't have money to, hire the attorney and put it together. No, it's out of the money you raise. And you could even, outside of this, I'll show you one more thing. You could pay yourself. So I can even pay myself up front $5-10 grand to my wholesale company for facilitating and finding the deal, and then step into the next box and create this. So you can get paid up front and get everything 100% paid for if you'd like. That's how equity share.
I'll add to that, and I want to go back to equity share, because I think equity share is a pretty general term, really.
It is very general.
And, there's a couple of different ways you can explain it, but as Mike's up there drawing, I'm always thinking about how would my IRA participate in that. And he brought up a good, a fair term, which is joint ventures. I've seen a lot of people like Mike who bring the experience and the knowledge and the access to deals to the table, and somebody has an IRA, but they don't have access to deals. They just want to get out of the market and invest with Mike, right? So let's just say Mike finds a $100,000 house, Mike's doing all the work, but maybe I've got 90 grand in an IRA that want to joint venture with Mike, and say Mike puts in 10. Well, now that Mike isn't a family member, Mike isn't one of those family that I mentioned, those are the only times you have to go pro rata. If I'm investing with Mike, Mike's not related to me or my IRA. So we can draft a joint venture where at the time of sale, Mike gets 50% of the profit, even though he only put 10% of the deal in. But that still might be a phenomenal deal for my IRA and good cash on cash return invested in something that's more tangible to me, that's real estate. So you start thinking about that as a tool as an investor is, hey, if I'm going to do all the work and sweat equity on this deal, maybe my brother has an IRA that will be the funding mechanism so I don't have to go to a bank, right? That's one way to do it. I've even done shared equity deals being passive as a note investor. I own notes in my Roth and my HSA. I've done a deal specifically on a deal that to a borrower that used to pay us 10-12% easy, but on this specific deal that was kind of put him in the red if he had to pay that high of an interest payment to us, and this was kind of a buy and hold deal. And we liked it. It was outside of Fort Worth at the time, and there was a lot of potential for this piece of property in 5 years. It wasn't the structure, but it was where it sat. And we went back to the drawing board and tried to figure out a win-win between the investor that needed 50 grand and us that had, Roth IRA sitting there. And basically what we structured it as, we structured it as a shared equity loan, where it's not a partnership. He still owns the property. There's just a clause in the note that says when he sells, we get X percentage of the profit when he sells. Now, we don't have control of the property. We can't tell him when to sell, but I'm still a lender with an equity split. Right? That could go one way or another, though. I'm part of the risk now, but it ultimately worked out pretty well. So when I hear equity share, that's so general. It can be used in a lot of different ways, active, passive, or in between.
Yeah, and in the old days of 18% plus 4 to 6 points for good credit, we used it we had a investment partner. And the way we structured it was that basically when I said sweat equity, we did all the sweating for that house. We did it all, and if we needed an electrician, we paid for electrician. Our money guy was the other half, and we split it 50-50 in that transaction for the sale. So he put up the money, we put up the sweat equity, paid for things like plumbers and electricians, and then at sale, we would split whatever that profit was, 50-50. We were able to do that with that person several times so that eventually we could accumulate a down payment that was sizable for us so that we could afford a monthly payment on a house that we actually wanted to own and live in. So it's a tool you can manage however you want. You're sharing the ability to buy and sell and the rest with someone else. At the time we did it, we got criticized a lot because why are you giving up 50% of your profit? And the answer was, well, I was never going to get any of that profit because on my own I couldn't do it. So having 50% of something is a whole lot better than 50% of nothing. And each 50% increment helped me get where I needed to go. So that my husband and I were really happy at the end of the day, and we got what we wanted. It took a few years to get there. But it's okay, that's part of the deal, right? So people just have to understand the tools are not overnight. You're going to work over time, but you have to clearly know what you're trying to do and what your risk assessments are. To do the transactions that we did, you have to know and trust that other person implicitly. There's a lot of risk on both sides. Go ahead.
I was just going to add that I think it might be a good point. We've heard a lot of tools. There's this kind of an overriding theme. Many of you might be thinking, these guys kind of think outside the box. They don't have their commission licensee blinders on. They look at things a little differently. There was a group of very senior investors, most of them still alive, that were getting together talking about this out-of-the-box thinking. What are some of the out-of-the-box thinking kind of deals have you done? One of the guys sitting back, finally after a few of these conversations, he said, "What box?" And there's where Mike's term earlier, we clean the slate. There is no box. If you put yourself in a box, then you're going to have to think outside of it. If you don't have a box, now you've got some tools to start picking from to create deals, to create transactions, create solutions. Our company name includes solutions for that reason. So that's maybe a good way to look at it, is we are not thinking outside the box. We don't have the box most people have.
Okay, let's go on to tax liens, something that people have forgotten about, but they come and go as the cycles come and go. So tax liens, what do we have on that?
Yeah.
Half of the country, including Arizona, use tax liens, okay? Where when you don't pay your taxes, somebody, once a year, they have a tax lien auction. They bid it down. So it starts at 16%. If nobody bids, you're the only bidder, you get 16% rate. But there are investors that are willing to take 8%, 7%, whatever. These are small amounts. These are 10 or 15, 20,000. These aren't like buying a house. But that tax lien, when you buy it, gives you the right, first of all, to buy the next tax liens in the series. And after 3 years, you have the right to foreclose on that property. So you might have invested over the course of 3 years, let's say it's $50,000, and you now can foreclose on this moron, the person that hadn't paid their taxes. Chances are they didn't have a mortgage. People think if they don't have a mortgage, they're not going to have any problems. You can lose your house to an HOA or to tax liens. They get foreclosed on. All of a sudden, they got to come up with the money to pay him off, and this county, who also charges them the full 16%. The county makes some money on these things without using their money. Okay? The other half of the state operates a little differently. It's a tax deed. And the tax deed, the buyer of that tax deed does not need, the owner of the property does not get foreclosed on by the person that's buying the deed. They get foreclosed on by the county or the state. And the owner of the property at the moment, so I can buy the property that has a huge tax debt at a discount, and at the time of the tax, I gotta know when that foreclosure's, and that date's set, it's known. I can either catch it up, or I can just say, I'm gonna wait, because I believe somebody's gonna bid a lot more than the $50,000 I invested. And when they do, I get the rest. So there's a couple different ways to play it. Tax liens, again, is a state like here, and tax deeds is the other half of the country, and that's not split equally. Each probably has 3,000 counties, so it's not like Arizona's. Maricopa County is a huge county. It's, I think, the second largest in the country, so Maricopa is a bad example. There are a lot of counties. We intend to do tax deeds in the future. I just haven't had the time. We happen to pick as our starting point the coastline of California and Hawaii. That's our goal. Okay, so those happen. We got to pick tax deed places to, and then we can expand to 2,800, 32,000, 3,000 more, however many counties doing the same thing. It's a process, but buying tax liens in Arizona is a nice safe bet. You can go see the property, you can go visit it. Don't plan on earning 16%. You're probably going to end up bidding 8% or lower, but you now have the right, and you will earn that 8% at the end. You're not going to get it in the meantime. So it's just another way of investing. It's much very concentrated. One time a year, you're doing all your analysis, all your work, and spending all your money. And then you just sit back, and your money is growing.
And if you want to get creative in the marketing aspect of it, we look for those leads that are going to foreclosure, and you take all these tools that we just talked about, and you approach the homeowner and try to help them or give them more for their house versus the person taking it over. And there's, even though all the people that buy the 3 years, you can even get creative and go buy their interests in their positions in those 3 years, so you can acquire all three and foreclose on the house. There's so many, it's like crazy.
Yep. We've done that piece. We haven't approached the homeowners as much, but we probably have. We just didn't know it. But you're right. The tax lien buyers also don't necessarily want to deal with a house.
Yeah.
They like income.
They'll sell it. They'll
Yes.
sell their position.
They'll sell their position. Now it's our problem to go through the foreclosure. So, again, these things can pile on.
Yes.
There is no box. There are tools. You decide how to use them to solve given problems.
Okay, and 1031 exchanges.
Are you doing any of those?
No,
I'm not doing them. We like owner financing. We sell all our properties with owner financing because we don't pay all the taxes at once. It's amortized over 30 years. It probably is going to get sold, whatever else, but then we have this big lump sum tax bill. But we like accumulating it that way. Secondly, our clients are the ones that we're dealing with, and we want to help them get bank financing, take that money and go buy another. 1031 is a tax-free exchange. It has a lot more rules than other methods. Okay, you have certain timeframes, 45 day timeframes or 90. By the way, you can buy a property and then go sell yours in a 1031, and you can use the money from the sale to buy it. Or most of them are done where you sell your property, take that money into a 1031, no taxes, you go buy another property. There's even some people doing some other things. As a matter of fact, one of them, I think we might talk about it, is Delaware statutory trust.
Yes.
And also, there's some companies setting up insurance contracts. So there's other ways to exit your 1031, but it's a tax-free sale of your property. You're not paying the taxes at the time you sold it, but you're obligated to do something with that money. And there's a couple different exits. Most people will buy another property. Somebody that's 90 and wants to exit, they probably don't want another property, and we will probably tell them the 1031 is not the answer for them, because what are they going to do with that money? They have to go buy something. Owner financing, different story. They don't pay the taxes now, it'll be spread out, or let their kids worry about paying the taxes later.
And it's more of a tax-deferred strategy.
It is.
You're not paying taxes when you sell the property, but you have to reinvest all of it to equal or greater property too. So there's a lot of rules in it, but in theory, it makes sense if you're trying to grow a bucket of money and you want a bigger bucket down the road, and you don't have to pay Uncle Sam every single time you sell a property, so your bucket grows bigger. A solution to that, if you're really trying to do that, is just do it in an IRA. Everything in an IRA is tax deferred, but you don't have to live within the identifying the property in the next period of days. You don't even have to stick to like or greater property. I can sell a property that's owned in my IRA and then go right into cryptocurrency or right back into the stock market or right into a note. So I'm not against 1031 exchanges, but if your whole concept is I want to defer taxes, just think about what's my IRA doing? That's already deferred. Maybe I just use that as my deferred tax mechanism. Or if you're like me, tax-free is the way to go, and just do everything you can in a Roth.
Here's a question over here.
Hey, Liz, really quick. Actually, can I ask you a question? I'm not trying to make a political statement, but I heard that if one of the people next week gets it, that they're planning possibly getting rid of the 1031 tax exchange. Have you heard that?
That's been floated through Congress at least 3 times in the last 10
Every election
years.
cycle.
I mean, in Congress, there was actual legislation as late as about 6, 7, well, Obama's last term, whenever that was.
Right.
So Congress revisits that. Here's the problem they run up. The 1031 tax exchange, also known as a Starker exchange, began in 1928. And the IRS did the actual math. And they looked at it and said, you know what, we are better off as a taxing entity if we let these people invest and grow, and then we tax up here instead of all this down here, because they can't reinvest. If we take a chunk of their money, 30% of their money, they can't go buy that next better thing and grow it as fast or well, and they did the math and figured out IRS is better off if you defer and then they tax you up here. So that what happens when every time that Congress revisits that thought that this is a big money thing we can do, that someone finally wakes up at the IRS, does the math again and says, you don't really want to do that if what you want is the gross amount you can get at the highest level. So I don't know, yes, someone will float it again.
Yeah, don't get confused. The IRS is an organization that's in the business to make money. They're
Yes.
going to do whatever makes the IRS more money. They're going to do whatever makes the IRS more money. And truthfully, allowing someone to defer taxes and grow a bigger amount that I can tax later, if I'm the IRS, I want the bigger amount that I tax. That's why the IRS likes traditional IRAs over Roths. So,
If
Go
you're
ahead.
old enough, if you're old enough, you remember the tax law for your own home that you owned was
Yes.
structured like a 1031. If you traded up, there was no tax on the profit. They've changed the tax law, so now there's this 2-year period, and you get this certain amount of exemption. But many years ago, older people told me about it, that the way it worked was you sold your house, you had a $50,000 gain back then, that was a lot of money, and you bought another house more expensive than the one that you just lived in, and most people trade up, no taxes, and it kept rolling forward. So 1031 is no different than the old tax law for homeowners.
You had a quick question?
Yeah, is there a tool, so if you have a client looking to do a 1031, they haven't sold the property yet, is there a way for them to transfer that into an IRA?
no, once you own it personally, it's yours. You can't. You would have to buy it in the name of IRA, but again, if you bought it in the IRA, you don't even need the 1031 exchange because everything's deferred anyways. But anytime, regardless of 1031 exchange, if you own it, there's no way to contribute it or sell it to your IRA. You can sell it to my IRA, you can sell it to Mike's IRA, you can't sell it to your own IRA.
So just a couple of things. First of all, for the replacement property, those of you who are familiar with the usual timeline we talk about for 1031 exchanges, which is 45-day identification period, 180 days total to consummate that transaction, where you're selling your property and replacing it with another property. You could, as mentioned, you can reverse that as well. But just so you know, that's not the only 1031 exchange mechanism. There are two other ways to do a 1031 exchange. If you want to get into the 1031 exchange world, I suggest you research both of those. There was one occasion when I was able to help a investor who was in the 45-day, 180-day period, but I was able to see that we weren't going to be in that marketplace. We weren't going to make his marks. He wasn't going to make his 1031 exchange. So we flipped to one of the other alternative methods, and it saved the transaction and his ability to defer his taxes. So if this is a world you want to go into, I suggest you read that and know about that very carefully. Talk to an accountant as well as a tax attorney, I think, to really iron out what you can and can't do. We mentioned Delaware statutory trusts. Those are used by people in 1031 exchange as a quick replacement property, because remember, you have that 45 days. If you go 1 day, if you go to 46 days, your deal is done, you're toast, you're paying those taxes. So you get down to your 45 days is coming to an end, you're at day 42, 43, things aren't looking great. You can go into a Delaware statutory trust, and that becomes your replacement property. Now you've identified it, you saved it. It's a fractional interest. They can close in a matter of a day or two, depending upon the one you choose. There are many, this is one tool for different investments. So you can invest in a warehouse, you can invest in a hotel, you can invest in commercial land in an opportunity zone. You can do lots of things that within the Delaware statutory trust. So that's a mechanism for quick exit if you're feeling that time pressure and you don't have to think. And then you can decide what to do later on. So I just want to bring that up since we mentioned it, that was something that we needed to do. We've got a few more minutes. Do you have any questions for our panel? Something you really want to know about or directions you would like to hear more about as far as using tools?
Let me just go back to the question you asked about 1031. The key question to ask your client. Agents don't do a good job. Sorry for being general, but agents do not do a good job. They all want to get the listing agreement. Ask them questions. Why is he trying to do a 1031? What's his objective? What's he trying to accomplish? If he says, I want to avoid taxes, there are other ways to do that. Don't think 1031 is the only way. So that's really what is it they're trying to accomplish. If they're looking to trade up, okay, but they need to understand the rules. So, and there are classes, and we've done some seminars on 1031 in AZREIA. So there are ways to find out more about the 1031s. But ask those questions. What are you really trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
be their partner, not sell them a listing agreement.
And if you are an investor, I did this with some of my investors where they had now gone to their top and now they're looking at liquidating their portfolio. We would use the 1031 exchange as we step down. So they would sell the expensive property, but we would identify a replacement property that took up maybe 80% of that equity position. So they were only paying taxes on the 20% that they took. And so we used that 1031 exchange to defer taxes on the way down. It was a great tax management tool for them. So people think about it as acquiring. It works really well when you're trying to liquidate as well, and you want control over your tax bill.
And Ron brings up a good point, because I can think of certain circumstances where somebody was selling a property and they didn't want to pay the taxes in the year they were selling it, but they didn't mind paying it in the next year. And I believe the investor solved it with a real estate option and just did an option for 2 years to just delay
You
that.
can just do an owner financing,
Yeah.
and then for that matter, you spread it out over 30 years.
Right.
So there's a lot of different ways to doing it. By the way, I hate to mention this, but another way to avoid paying taxes is to die. And there are step-up rules. So again, there's
And then it's someone else's fault.
right? Ask Steinbrenner.
All right, question over here.
So, Ken, actually talking about death, because that was one of my questions, can you just mention something about the step-up basis? Because I'm still confused with, I had a client who died, or the parents died, and they go, hey, lawyer calls me, we need the valuation now, and how does that actually work?
Yeah, very simply, you bought the property at $100,000, it's now worth $22 million. Okay? Could it happen? Yes, you've done the upgrades, you did some of the stuff that Mike had talked about. The heirs have to do an appraisal on it. Hopefully, they all agree that they're going to what they're going to do with that property. They get an appraisal, and at the date of death is when the appraisal's done. They are accepting that property from from the estate at the value of $22 million, not $100,000. They have no tax bill. So the basis, the property cost, the cost basis is the full term, was $100,000, but at time of death and appraisal and passing to the heirs, the new basis is $22 million.
And is that for both investment properties and primary?
Primary has some exemptions that probably don't cross. Most people don't have 22 million profit on their houses. If they do, I'd like to meet them. But usually, it's really investment properties for the most part. But as your home, you're gonna be able to sell with a $500,000 if it's a couple, and $250,000 for the individual. You're not paying taxes on that portion. And generally, that covers most people. So I think it can apply on a home, but again, I've never seen it. I'd have to check the tax law. I'm not a tax attorney. I've never played one on television. But I do know the rules, and that'd be one nuance I wouldn't know, is whether personal property could also go. And again, I've never seen a situation where it applied.
Thank you.
They could also put it in a beneficiary deed or a trust with a retirement plan, and then your trustees take it, and you end up with zero tax off of it.
Well, and it's got to get that, and there's the difference between a trust versus it going through probate.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are some nuances where you have to understand those things. So unfortunately, education comes with earning money. You got to get educated to earn it.
One real quick last question.
Yes, last question, please. I really want to know this. Since I work around elderly, and I want to know how to use this life estate sale. Because my entire life here is about elderly. And I would like how I can present myself as an investor to help them, while I'm also providing care, because I'm providing care, providing everything for them.
Well, the tool is as we outlined, where the person, you come in as the investor, you purchase the property, but you have within that, because it's a life estate sale, they are allowed to live within that property until the time that they either leave permanently or pass away. That is the key to it. And now you're talking about you have the rights to the property because you own the property, but they have the right to occupy and use for the entire duration of their life or until they leave the property permanently. There is no template for this. It is absolutely a one at a time transaction because you have to meet the needs of that person as well as yourself. And there will be times when this does not work for the person that you're working with. Either you or them cannot make it work for your purposes. So you have to go to someone who is both a attorney who understands this and can help you structure it for your purposes, and someone who can guide you through what are all the things you need to think of. In some cases, you may not only do the purchase of it, but you would want to do all the maintenance of the property. You would want to make sure that you're paying property taxes. What about the insurance? So there's all sorts of things to think about. So you really need someone who is a legal person to help you structure the transaction, and then also make sure you're thinking through all the things that you need to on that particular transaction, because it's all about what's best for them and you. So a lot of times, the older the person is, they can't do maintenance. They're not going to remember to pay the trash bill. It ain't going to happen, right? They're not going to do filters in the AC. Someone who's younger and doing that, they will. But you just have to structure it very individually, which is why you need your own legal team to help you figure out what you need to do.
And you could, as we mentioned earlier, you could buy it with seller financing or owning, if that's free and clear, so that you're paying them installments, which means they have additional income. They could use that income to pay their caregivers. Okay, and those are separate agreements. I would not put that into the life estate. That gets very messy. Okay? All of a sudden the caregiver says, you know what, my arm hurts, I'm not doing this anymore. Now what? Okay, there's a violation of the contract, the default. So all of those things, the life estate sale would allow them to sell their property, have some income from it, and on the other hand, not deal with the maintenance. Live there for free. So it can help them avoid costs, especially if there's a mortgage on the property. They're no longer paying the mortgage. That's your problem as the buyer. All right. So it could be a tool, but it is, and I would agree. It's understanding what they really want, what you really want, and then putting the legal agreements together to make sure that nobody ends up getting sued and dying over the fact that they didn't get the health care they needed.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so I want to remind you, you have a survey. Please fill it out and leave it at the front desk, if you will. We'd appreciate that. You can go to the Arizona Department of Real Estate website to find information about what we're doing, as well as our Facebook, X, and LinkedIn page, and we have a podcast. That's what that flyer is about. I want to make sure you know that AZREIA has a website, AZREIA.org. Please go there if you'd like more information about AZREIA and what they're doing. They have lots of educational classes as well as meetings for you to meet and speak and learn. And I want to thank you all for attending. Thank you so much.
I hope you found the event interesting and that you learned new information that can help you think about your next real estate transaction with a better awareness of the various tools used in real estate. Remember, it doesn't matter if you are buying, selling, or leasing your first home, a commercial property, or agricultural property. These tools have been used for a very long time and can help all parties achieve their goals. The important item to remember is you have an obligation to yourself and to the other party to the transaction. All parties need to understand, ask questions, and only agree to contract terms they are prepared to honor. Think about consequences and prepare the contract as best you can for the what-ifs that might occur. And build your own team of people with knowledge and expertise to help guide you. On another topic, on Friday, November 22nd, the department announced the docket opening for rulemaking. The administrative rules for the department are to be reviewed every 5 years. The department completed its rule review report and submitted it to the governor in June. In October, the department submitted the proposed rule changes to GERC, the Governor's Regulatory Review Council, and received approval. Also in October, the governor waived the rulemaking moratorium. On November 1st, the department submitted the notice of docket opening to the Secretary of State, which was posted on November 22nd, 2024. You will find a direct link to the Arizona Administrative Register on the Arizona Department of Real Estate website, azre.gov. Scroll down to the news bulletin and click on the article ADRE Notice of Docket Opening Feedback Requested by January 21st, 2025 article. You will also find the Notice of Docket Opening on the department's social media pages. This is your opportunity as an Arizona resident or business to review the proposed rule changes and let the department know your thoughts. I'm Liz Recchia. Thanks for joining me today. And remember, keep up, keep current with ADRE.